lovers, welcome back to Book Caffeinate with Books. Today, I thought I'll share my views on why you don't see a particular author more recommended on my channel, and that's why I decided to do the CoHo review haul. Now, besides the fact that a lot of these have been labeled as romance, I think a lot of them would do much better if they were targeted towards the right audience by the right categorization aspect and telling the readers what they should be expecting in this particular book and not just the romance aspect of it. So here I have 5 books that I have read over the course of last few years by her and the reason behind what made me skip rest of her work. So in this video I'll be sharing them from best to worst category, starting off with the best book that I've read by her. This book is so much more than a love story where it talks about actually drawing a line between your relationships and how far you would actually go for the person you love and what all would you be enduring for the sake of that love. Those are the aspects that are discussed in this book. So I personally would categorize this as apart from romance, this is discussing physical abuse, trauma, and also has those tropes of toxic relationships. So I would be sharing them as disclaimers for this particular book. And those are the tropes that are mainly prominent in most of her books. So I would want my readers to keep those aspects in mind while picking any of her books. Talking about the story of this particular one, it's about Lily Blooms, who, despite her challenges that she has faced in her past and the scars that she's still carrying from those eventful things that have happened in her past, she is trying to make the best of her life and trying to grow forward out of it, where she meets this person and falls in love, and then the whole chemistry goes ahead. But the thing is that the other person also has some past traumatic events that have triggered certain kind of behavior in him, and now both of them are scarred by the past and are trying to make work through with the kind of relationship that they are developing right now, and that's where the story will lead you. Now, this one is the only book that actually felt to me like the most realistic book from across all her works, and that is why it felt good reading this contemporary book. Whereas the others are not so much relevant and realistic to the real world, this one did showcase those aspects from a reality point of view, which made me correlate it with the modern world much better. And that is the only reason I actually liked this book. Next up, Verity by Colleen Hooper is a book that is a thriller romance and it is based from the villain's perspective. So it discusses antagonistic journaling in a very depthful manner. The story here revolves around a writer who is now physically injured and cannot complete her book. So the publishers are basically looking out for someone else who could jump in, take the hold, and just complete this book so that they can publish it. And that's where our main protagonists come into the picture. And then there's this intertwining chemistry between the main protagonist and the hot husband of the writer, and things take a hit from there for a very predictable twist. But the fact that it also mentioned a lot of details around the antagonistic journaling point of view kept me going throughout the book. And yeah, there were certain, let's say, questionable moments that happened, but it was still an okay read for me. And the last part, where there are certain twists happening that actually keep you lingering with the thought of who actually did those things that are mentioned in the book, and it will keep you pondering for a while even when you finish that book, and that is why it was still fine reading this book. Our next book, It Starts With Us, is the next book in the It Ends With Us duology, now that it's duology. But initially it was made up to be a single book, and then this book was written because of fans' demand, I guess. And that is why the plot felt a little made up for me. And even though while I was picking this book, for some reasons I had the expectation that it will showcase a lot of details of Lily and Atlas's past, so like a prequel story plus a sequel, but this mostly had of the aftermath and things that actually happen after It Ends With Us. So if you have not read that one, you might as well not pick this one up, because otherwise it will just be a mess up of the whole story. But the book was hilarious. Atlas's character was still good, but Lily was behaving in a very questionable manner in this particular book, which made a lot of readers agitated, even me. But Atlas, yeah, he was a insta-worthy crush for a very long time because of his skills and character development. So I will give that to Coho. But apart from that, the plot of this book, Lily's decision making, and everything else that was basically happening was a nah for me. And now entering the phase of disappointments and reminders of him was one such book. The story here is actually written in a letter writing format, which was a great thing. There were certain aspects in each of a book that actually made me pick up those books, and then I just felt disappointed that why did I waste my time reading this book? And this book was one such case. The story here was basically around a female protagonist who had some eventful past, and because of that she was in jail for a very long time, and she had a daughter that was taken away from her, and now she's growing with her grandparents, and basically she wants her back in her life, but she doesn't know how to get through the grandparents because she did something very horrible with their son. And the story is basically taking ahead from there. Now, there were a couple of issues with this book, starting off with the fact that apart from the letter writing aspect, there was nothing much believable in this book. A lot of it was feeling silly to me as a reader. That do you think I'm so naive that I will believe this? I don't want to say the word, but yeah, that. I mean, you're trying to change your personality and get into the old town by disguising yourself by coloring your hair, and you have basically stayed there half your life, and you think people will not notice you, which is very strange and silly. And even if it is kept aside for a moment, the disguising part, there are a handful of things that are further going down lane from here into the story, especially his best friend falling in love with XYZ. And then there is this portion of, convincing people of forgiving you for everything just by a single letter. I'm sorry, that does not happen in real life. And this is a contemporary, it's supposed to be more realistic. If I want something that is non realistic, I might as well read a fantasy book, not something contemporary. So, yeah, that was another problem. And my final problem was that there was an incident that happened in the story back in her days before she went to jail, where she came back from that accident and she came home and she fell asleep. How can you fell asleep after such an eventful thing that happened to you?
I fell asleep. You fell asleep?
And my final book in this video, Ugly Love, was another disappointing read for me. The story here is about a boy who has been scarred in his past because of certain circumstances, and now he thinks he can never fall in love again. And then he meets a girl, and she falls in love with him, and he's having a hard time accepting it, etc. etc. Pure romance story with a lot of traumatic past that has happened in one's life, and the same plot line, the same story, things figuring out. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I know people with a lot of traumatic past have trouble falling in love again, and that is purely understandable even in real life. But what I did not like in this book was then again that a lot of things were happening just in the past, and nothing in the present was really moving forward. This book to me felt even sillier than the reminders of him because of a lot of instances. Then again, I was observing that I have some common challenges across all these books, and since I've rated these books from 5 to 2 stars wala range, so I thought I might give you the details of the list, why I'm basically disappointed by them and why I don't feel like reading any other book by her. Point number one, most of these books have a common plot line of physical or verbal abuse that is happening with these characters, and then they're scarred by those past traumatic events. And that is basically shaping up their personality and how they become their future version of themselves, and the kind of choices they make, the kind of things they get scared of pretty easily and stay away from certain aspects in life specifically related to love and other angles. So that is one common plot line that I did mention. Point number two, none of these books are actually categorized in the right format. All of these are simply categorized as contemporary romance, chick lit, and none of these books are chick lit, might I tell you. So I think they really need to work on the categorization aspect, and because of that, it is actually confusing the readers a lot of what to expect from a book before they actually jump in. So you might want to, for the very least, create valid and clear disclaimers about the book, how it talks. It is basically talking about toxic nature of relationships, abuse, mental trauma, and other effective things. Point number three, my major issue that these books are written to be as contemporary books, and none of these books, except It Ends With Us, actually felt that realistic to a reader from my perspective, and that is one reason which I absolutely did not enjoy, because I first of all don't really go and put myself out there for a romantic read, especially contemporary. And if I'm doing so, the least I can expect is you to deliver on what you're promising, which did not happen for most of the books. And this saga of disappointments would have continued if I have read any more books by her, because it was all getting very monotonous and disappointing in a very similar way. So it was my clue to stop reading these books. Now, I do understand that I'm nobody to tell you what to read or what to not. It's your call, but I basically know that I am done with my fair share of CoHo books, and I won't be reading them for a very long while, if not forever, because you just can't promise that. But if you still feel like that you do have to read at least one of those books, I think It Ends With Us would be the only book, but with the right disclaimers in mind, I think you can give that one a try. And with that, I'll take your leave and complete this ranting video of CoHo books. I hope you had some insightful knowledge about what to expect if you're jumping into one of these books, and you make a wise decision out of it. And apart from that, if you do want me to cover up any other author's work with multiple books that I've read across the ones that are published, I would love to do that. You can let me know in the comments down below. And besides that, I'll catch up with you in my next video. Until then, keep your coffee strong and your TBRs long. Goodbye.